The sun bled slow and honey-colored over the timbered fronts of Lone Willow, that tired western town where dust was as common as breath. Cicadas hummed in the cottonwoods, their voices threading the evening like a low hymn, and the boards of the post office glowed with that final light, gold pressed against weathered gray. Sheriff Eli Cartwright stood there, as he had for 3 nights running, boots planted square, hat in hand, his body carved by patience and loneliness. He was waiting for a letter to take root in flesh, waiting for a bride promised by mail, a woman who might soften the years of silence his heart had borne. His hands, hard with rope and iron, trembled against the brim of his hat as if he were a boy again. The sky stretched out wide as eternity, and Eli felt smaller than he had in years. The wagon came in a hush of wheels and creak of harness. Dust rose like a veil, and from it stepped not one but 2 figures, sisters, their faces alike as mirror glass. The crowd gathered quick, for in small-town news spreads faster than prairie fire. Murmurs crackled, boots scuffed, and someone whispered sharp. Sheriff ordered 1 bride, but 2 came. The twins stood on the wagon's lip, skirts catching light, eyes filled with a mix of fear and defiance. Clara Belle McGraw lowered her gaze, quiet as prayer, her hands folded neat against her waist. Beside her, Celia May McGraw lifted her chin, bold though her laugh trembled like a broken fiddle string. They were daughters of hunger and dust, travelers who had known too much road and too little rest. Both clutched the edges of a promise, but only one could claim it. Eli felt the town's eyes on him, the judgment sharp as barbed wire. Heat rose to his face, not from the sun, but from shame. He had wanted to be chosen once in his life, wanted a woman to walk toward him with certainty. Instead, he had become a spectacle, a man weighed and measured by gossips and gamblers alike. Clara Belle's gaze brushed his and fell away. Celia May tried to smile, as if laughter could armor the ache of being unwanted. He wanted to speak, to offer words of welcome, but his tongue felt nailed to silence. Out of duty more than desire, Eli offered them a place beneath his roof. The crowd scattered, still buzzing, leaving behind whispers like dust that clung to skin. That night the house carried new sounds, the creak of extra chairs, the rustle of skirts, the careful setting down of borrowed things. Clara Belle folded laundry with a grace that turned plain work into something tender. Celia May mended his torn sleeve with quick fingers, leaving behind the faint scent of lavender thread. It was not in words that they drew near, but in the quiet exchange of gestures. Eli, without thinking, left an extra cup of coffee on the porch rail each morning. Clara placed wildflowers in a chipped vase on the table, softening the room's hard edges. Celia, catching his weariness, brought a spark of humor into dull evenings. He remained distant, his silence his shield, yet found his loneliness sharpened each time he saw them lit by lamplight. One evening, after the lamps were doused, Eli stood by his window. Beyond the glass, he watched the twins in the flicker of firelight, their shadows long against the boards. Their presence was both balm and burden. He had opened his door out of duty, but the house now beat with a different rhythm. His solitude, once a steady ache, had become restless, alive, unsettled. He gripped the sill, breathing the night air thick with dust and honeysuckle, and wondered if a man could be both grateful and afraid of the very thing he had long prayed for. The days that followed gathered like storm clouds, heavy with talk and judgment. In Lone Willow, gossip traveled quicker than the prairie wind. At the mercantile, women clucked their tongues over bolts of cloth, whispering that the sheriff had taken in 2 brides under one roof. At the saloon, men smirked into their glasses, wagering on which sister he would choose. Even children, innocent and sharp, pointed from porches as the twins passed, their giggles carrying sting. Eli Cartwright bore it with the tightness of a man under a yoke. His badge had carried him through gunfights and lawless nights, but no pistol or gallows rope had weighed on him like this choice. Clara Belle moved softly through his home, her presence like a psalm hummed under breath. Celia May carried a brightness that defied the dust, laughing quick but faltering when she thought no one saw. Both of them, in their own ways, stitched themselves into the fabric of his days. And he could not imagine tearing the cloth. One dawn found him on the porch, boots propped against the rail, coffee cooling in his hand. Clara Belle stepped out, shawl around her shoulders, eyes deep as twilight. They spoke in the hush before the town woke. "I reckon folks think me a burden," she whispered, voice trembling as though afraid of its own sound. Eli's jaw tightened. You ain't no burden. He paused, searching for words he had never learned. I fear choosing wrong. Fear hurting one heart while saving another. Her eyes lifted to his, and in them he saw not weakness, but a strength quiet as river rock. We all fear that, she said, but fear don't change what's true. Celia May overheard from the doorway, her pride cut sharp. She swallowed her ache, smiled wide, and later that day, when town tongues wagged cruel at the well, she stood tall and defended Eli, her laughter turning barbs into shame. She gave grace even as her own heart bruised. Sunday came, the church bell tolling across the dry fields. The whole town gathered, anticipation like gunpowder in the air. It was no longer a private matter, it had become spectacle. Whispers burned hotter than the sun, the sheriff must choose. Inside the church, wooden pews groaned beneath the weight of eyes turned toward him. The twins sat side by side, hands brushing but not clasping. Eli stood at the front, hat clutched against his chest, silence stretching. For a moment, shame threatened to choke him. But then, from some deep well of quiet courage, he lifted his voice. I reckon you all came here to see me choose between two good women, he said, voice steady though his hands trembled. But I won't. I won't treat love like cattle, branded and sold to the highest bidder. I won't turn dignity into a wager. His gaze swept the room, resting on Clara, then Celia. They came here with courage, each of them. They deserve better than to be made a show. If love's to be, it'll be chosen by the heart, not forced by the crowd. Gasps cracked through the pews. Some muttered anger, others folded arms. Yet a hush, reverent and sharp, settled in the space his words carved. Clarabelle rose, slow as dawn, and crossed the aisle. She said nothing, only slipped her hand into his. It was a gesture plain and holy, and in that quiet, all knew what words could not say. Celia May's eyes glistened, but she smiled, the kind of smile that hurts even as it blesses. She pressed her sister's hand, whispering, sometimes family means letting go. And so it was decided, not with shouts or bargains, but with silence, grace, and choice. The town had come for spectacle, but left with a lesson it would not name. As the wagon rattled away days later, carrying Celia May toward her own horizon, the dust rose like incense in the evening air. Eli and Clarabelle stood together at the edge of the road, her shawl brushing against his sleeve, his hand resting with care at her back. No vows had yet been spoken, but something deeper bound them, two souls who had chosen each other freely. The sun sank slow, bleeding color across the plains. And in that light, the sheriff felt a weight ease, not because life had grown simple, but because it had grown true. And you, dear heart, if ever you feel the sting of the world's judgment pressing you to choose before you are ready, remember Lone Willow. Remember the sheriff who would not let love be auctioned, the twins who met shame with courage, and the wagon that carried not just brides, but the freedom of choice. For love is not thunder, nor is it spectacle. It is in the quiet cup set on a porch rail, in the mending of a sleeve, in the small grace of letting go. It waits for no crowd, only for the courage to stand in the light and be found.